All right, guys, good evening. And as you all know, March Madness is coming up, and we're on the 5 year anniversary of something not tragic, but something terrible that happened to the world of March Madness when we didn't have March Madness. And now this is from the Big Sky tournament. They have a banner to celebrate it. Take a look, 2020, COVID, winner of this tournament in the Big Sky. And if you see right here, they also actually have the signature
It's got a
of that
it has a
happening.
logo
So
too.
it has a logo too. So
That's awesome.
I'm
Uh,
telling you that it's the right way to go, I guess, or not the right way to go, but it's the way you have to go sometimes when you're celebrating it. Anyway, I'm Steven Rabinowitz.
I'm Jay Kaplan, and y'all know this is, as far as I'm concerned, this is the most wonderful time of the year.
and I'm Anthony Schrader. That just gave me flashbacks of me literally talking to Jay inside
That's
Madison
right.
Square Garden
That's right.
the night everything shut down because I was at the post night of Big East tournament
Yep.
and all hell just broke loose from that point on.
Yep.
It's not necessarily the most wonderful time of the year yet. That's next show, but duh, it's the March Madness edition of On the Sports Lights. And before we start, let me remind you to subscribe to youtube.com/on the sports lines and facebook.com/on the sports lines because frankly, subscribers don't grow on trees. I've tried. Gentlemen, in the award-winning play that is March, try my best. It doesn't necessarily work all the time. Okay. Gentlemen,
Oh,
in the
good. I got your
award-winning
back, partner.
I understand. I understand. All right, gentlemen, in the award-winning play that is March Madness, there are many, many acts. As Champ Week winds down in college basketball, and we get a bracket in less than 48 hours, we'll show you the teams that are looking for starring roles, the teams looking to stay in the main cast, and the teams who just want to see their name on the callback sheet for Selection Sunday. But for now, Act One, NFL free agency. It's wild. All right, we're going to do something completely different for this show, as we'll talk about the NFL free agency in the open and the close. But when a local team decides to use a 2 year contract on a new signal caller, and then when we prepare for another team signing another quarterback, but it doesn't actually happen, oh well, we'll start the show with that. A seance, a release, an exorcism, these are some of the things that the Jets management seem to want to do to get rid of the ghost of Aaron Rodgers from Florham Park. Enter the solution, a guy who hung out with Aaron Rodgers in the NFC North for many years in Bears quarterback Justin Fields. He will be the likely, stress likely, starter for Gangrene in 2025, or at least will have a very good shot of getting the reps as QB1. All right, let's talk about this. Anthony, I've given you the positive. So, what is the positive of the former Ohio State signal caller coming over to MetLife Stadium?
Some of one of the positives is the fact that he agrees to a short-term deal. So at the very least, if he's not going to be the full-time starter for the long haul, he would be a good placeholder. Not to mention, he's only 26 years old. He's still a young quarterback. And also, you think about this: do the Jets still have Tyron Taylor on their roster? Because they're pretty much the same similar quarterback. And when you think about last year and the play calling, the differential between Aaron Rodgers and Tyrod Taylor, you won't have that this time around with the fact that they're both quarterbacks who can use their legs and basically get out of the pocket and make plays in that circumstances. But think about this too. With Justin Fields, he was the fourth quarterback selected in the same draft with a Jets Zach Wilson. So it's almost like in some cases the Jets are getting a bit of a mulligan and a quarterback they passed up. Um, but also, and obviously Jay, no, last year with the Steelers, Justin Fields did enough. I mean, he did enough to put the Steelers in a position where they could possibly lose the game. But we kind of sort of writing on the wall when Russell Wilson became healthy, and he was relegated back to the bench. Of course, when Wilson struggled, the talks of going back to Justin Fields came back up again. But it's a fresh start for him. He gets to reunite with his former teammate Garrett Wilson, so that should be interesting. And if they can pick up pick the chemistry back up that they had in Ohio State. But right now, if you look at this signing, it's actually not a bad sign whatsoever for the Jets because if things don't work out, they can always there's always another option goes to get a quarterback through the draft. Maybe another free agent quarterback shows up next season. But for right now, this is a low risk, high reward move for the Jets.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point when it comes down to it. But Jay,
Mm.
on the negative side, you were not happy with the Steelers picked him up last year, and all they had to give up was a seventh rounder and no real money. Now, Justin had some success, at least record wise, with Pittsburgh last year, but there's a lot of negative side with him becoming a QB1 in Florham Park.
Yeah, I mean, look, my issues with Justin Fields goes all the way back to his time at Ohio State, and we talked about it on the draft show that year. Side note to former Ohio State teammates getting together, the Jets also re-signed his former center this past week, so go figure.
Better than re-signing everybody in the Aaron Rodgers tree like they've done in the past. So at least we're going up a little bit.
There you go. Look, here's the thing. The narrative with Fields is that the Bears' dysfunctionality screwed him up, and all he needs is a fresh start in a scheme that can take advantage of his skill set and put him in a position to succeed in the immediate present and aid in his development into a more than serviceable QB1 in the future. And the Jets are now going to be the second team to attempt to help Fields resurrect his career and reach the potential that was ascribed to him coming out of Ohio State back in 2021 as the 11th overall pick in that year's draft. Now, I said on the show last year that I was impressed by the seeming improvement in Fields in leading the Steelers to a 4-2 record while he was QB1 to start the season. As a passer, he was efficient, playing within the parameters of Arthur Smith's run-first offensive scheme. His passer rating, 93.3, his completion percentage of 66.3, and his EPA per attempt of 0.17 were the highest of his 4-year career. He also did a better job of protecting the football. In 3 seasons as the Bears starting quarterback, he turned it over 41 times, 30 picks and 11 fumbles. In 6 games as the Steelers starter, just 2 turnovers, 1 fumble and 1 interception. He did actually fumble a total of 6 times, most of those coming on snap-related issues, but the Steelers recovered 5 of them. Now, here's the thing. He wasn't asked to do too much through the air, as evidenced by him only averaging 184.3 passing yards per game, just 6.9 yards per attempt, 5-to-1 TD interception split. This was by design, as the Steelers' passing game with Fields as QB1 was based on working around his limitations as a passer and minimizing risk by putting him in the safest situations possible. The focus was on the quick passing game with short throws, often outside the numbers and into the flats, and often at a bootleg plays, which cuts the field down in half and shortens the number of progressions he'd have to work through. They did occasionally sprinkle in some deep shots, mostly off play action, which is a standard in Smith's playbook. The Steelers also made good use of Fields' legs. He rushed for 289 yards and scored 5 TDs on the ground. And it all worked to a certain extent. Steelers did average a little under 21 points a game with an offensive success rate of a little over 43% and a red zone efficiency rate of 50%, with Fields taking the snaps. But when you dig a little deeper into his next-gen stats, as you guys know I am wont to do, the same limitations from his scouting report coming out of college were still apparent. The accuracy and anticipation issues from the pocket when he's asked to execute a more of a pure drop-back scheme. His time to throw of 3.04 seconds was 40th of the 43 eligible quarterbacks. The 16 sacks he took equated to a 9.1% sack rate. And granted, that's better than the 12.4 rate he had in Chicago, but it was still well above the league average. Just 14.3% of his passes traveled 20-plus air yards. He only completed 6 of those 22 attempts. That's a 27.2% completion percentage. 19.3% of his attempts traveled 15-plus air yards, and 27.3% of his pass attempts traveled just 10-plus air yards, which goes back to the use of the quick passing game and short throws. All of those are career lows, as was his 7.8 air yards per attempt. His quarterback EPA per start was just 2.2, and his EPA per dropback was a meager 0.04. Look, there's a reason that Fields has never been better than a mid-tier 3 quarterback who needs a heavier running game and or defensive component to win games. A lower volume drop back passing offense suits him best. I wish the Jets luck in trying to make Fields into a passer serviceable enough to be an actual threat to make success-worthy plays in the passing game, and not one you need to worry about being a threat to make turnover-worthy plays in the passing game.
It is true, but the one thing that I kind of really, what you mentioned when Fields got the team off to a 4-2 start last year, albeit a lot because of the system and everything, was the real readiness of Mike Tomlin to turn the reins over to Russell Wilson despite all of that success. And it worked out to a certain extent. I think we've heard many stories about Russell Wilson and what he was willing to do and not to do with Arthur Smith. We're not going to always know all of the details unless someone says it publicly. And knowing the Steelers, that will never ever happen. I think this is a good move. I think this is a good move for the Jets just because of, again, low risk, high reward. And I think there's going to be a target that they're going to look for eventually. Obviously, I don't think it's going to be in the 2025 draft, but in the 2026 or 27 draft. Now, Anthony kind of inspired me to look up that draft. And we have one of the worst quarterback classes I think we may ever have, because Trevor Lawrence was the number 1 pick. He has had a couple of good seasons. He has a big contract, but he still has a lot to prove. Trey Lance was the number 3 pick, and I don't think he's got any shot in the NFL. And Mac Jones, now of the San Francisco 49ers as of this week, was the number 15 pick. And in that draft, you had people like Jamar Chase, Penei Sewell, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Micah Parsons, and Patrick Surtain Jr., who just won Defensive Player of the Year. So I'm going to say if you have that pick in the near future, just be aware when we talk in the NFL draft shows about Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. You might want to look at your other options too and try to get a quarterback like Justin Fields as a project instead of looking for the next big thing, because sometimes it doesn't work. And now that's why Justin Fields is on his 3rd team in just 3 years. All right. Let's move on. Act 2, as we move into the meat of a long show. This is college basketball's big dogs, or the ones that are showing everyone they're big, even though they may not be. So they're Napoleons. Sorry. Unless your name is Duke, Auburn, or Houston, you're playing this weekend from the conference tournament title. But you know that you are going to very likely, out of those 3 teams, be a 1 seed on Selection Sunday. All 3 are still in their tournaments as of today. This section, though, is to focus on that next group of teams storming the castle, looking for a 1, 2, or 3 seed upgrade. Now remember, some of these teams, in fact, I think all of these teams, are still alive in their conference tournament. We want to know is, did they do enough? Do they still have more work to do? Is their question complete? We'll talk about that right now. Jay, you'll start us off. When Rick Pitino isn't on The Tonight Show or terrorizing the Big East in Madison Square Garden, he's leading St. John's to high seed glory and winning every which way but loose. But Jay, did they do enough to go at the highest position that they can?
Right now, I mean, coming into the Big East tournament, St. John's was a projected number 3 seed in the East region by The Athletic. Coming into the Big East, they finished the regular season 27-4, 18-2 in conference, regular season champs. They were 9-2 out of the conference, 18-0 at home, 8-2 on the road, 1-2 in neutral sites. Pretty solid metrics. Their net was 16, KPI was 14, strength of record was 7, BPI was 16. On the strength of schedule line, net was 69. Non-conference schedule was a little weak at 166. They were only 4-4 in quad 1 wins, 0-2 out of the conference. 10-0 in Q2, 7-0 in Q3, 6-0 in Q4. Best wins, they swept both UConn and Marquette, had a home win over Creighton. Those are all 1 and 2s. Best losses, they had a 1-possession road loss to Creighton, a 1-possession neutral site road losses to Baylor and Georgia. All those are quad 1s. No bad losses. Coming in, they were the number 15 adjusted efficiency team in Ken Palm. They were 66th on offensive efficiency and number 3 on defensive efficiency. Now, I know the question, is did they do enough to move up to a number 2 seed? But I think a better question is there really anything they can do to move up to a 2 seed? And that's not so much a knock on the Johnnies as it is accepting that chances are there isn't much that teams ahead of them can do to truly hurt themselves enough to get knocked off the 2 seed line. But as that's not the assignment, let's see what might be possible. Starting with the Captain Obvious first things first scenario, St. John's has to win the Big East tournament. Any other result, they're staying as a 3 seed. Now, winning the Big East tournament would mean potentially having knocked off a combination involving Marquette, followed by UConn or Creighton, which would give St. John's 2 additional Q1 wins, starting with the Golden Eagles in tonight's Big East semis. But they also need help, which would involve one or more of the teams above them losing early enough or badly enough in their conference tournaments to potentially create an opening on the 2 line. All of those teams are from conferences that are currently ranked higher in the net than the Big East, which is the 4th ranked conference. St. John's is the highest ranked Big East team in the net, but they're still outside the top 10. They were outside the top 10 at number 14 after beating Butler. And no other Big East team is inside the top 20. Marquette is 25. UConn is 29. Creighton is 40. All right, here are the projected number 2 seeds as of Monday. I don't believe anything has changed either with the Athletic or Joe Lunardi or Jerry Palmer or anyone else. Midwest, Alabama, which is the number 3 team in the number 1 conference in the nation in terms of net rating, the SEC. They're ranked number 6 in the net. They're playing now, and Rabbi, if I'm correct, they're about to go into the half, up by half a dozen on Kentucky.
Up by 10 now.
Okay, so there you go.
Up by 10 now, but Kentucky at the line. So yeah, they're going up in the half. They're going up in the half up. So
okay. In the East, Tennessee's the projected number 2 seed. Also out of the SEC, they're the number 4 ranked team in the net. They're the number 4 team in the SEC, ranked number 5 in the net. They beat Texas, which is a Q1 win earlier today, 83-72 to advance to the SEC tournament semis. In the South, the projected number 2 seed is Michigan State out of the Big Ten, which is the number 2 ranked conference in the net. Michigan is the number 1 ranked team in that conference. They're number 10 overall in the net. They beat Oregon to start the day, which seems like forever ago, which is also a Q1 win, 74-64, as they advance to the semis of their conference tournament. West projected number 2, Texas Tech out of the Big 12, which is the 3rd ranked conference in the net. Texas Tech is the number 2 ranked team in that conference, 7th overall in the net. They're playing now, and Rabbi, I believe they are getting their asses handed to them by Arizona, last I checked.
Up by 8 at half.
Oh!
Down by 8 at half.
Down by 8 at half. All right. So, look, the Johnnies took care of their end of things, first by beating Butler 78-57 in their first Big East tournament game and doing it convincingly. Jumped out to an 18-3 lead before the game even reached the under 12 timeout. Butler never got any closer than 8 at any point thereon. St. John's never trailed. And the Big East's best defense, they allowed just 66 points and just 40% from the floor, and are top 10 in the nation in stocks in both steals and blocks. Held Butler to 34.5 from the floor, 30% from 3, out-rebounded them by 10, turned them over 15 times, including 9 steals, and converted them into those turnovers into 24 points. Dominated them both in the paint, 44-18, and in transition, 15-0. Newly minted Big East Player of the Year, R.J. Lewis, led the Johnnies with 20. And one game after posting the program's first triple-double this century, Kadari Richmond had 15 points, 9 assists, and 8 boards. Aaron Scott, who's been a key role player all season for St. John's, chipped in 15, including 3 of 6 from beyond the arc. Look, the tournament's number 1 seed has now won 7 straight. It's now 8 straight, and 18 of 19 since the calendar year flipped to 2025. And the win over Butler improved their MSG record to 10-0. Tonight, they made the type of statement in the semis that should make the committee sit up and take notice. Marquette, as expected after the way they lost to St. John's last weekend, came out like a house on fire, jumping out to a 24-9 lead by the 12:42 mark. But then St. John's shook off the punch in the face, outscored Marquette 26-13 the rest of the way. They went into the half down 2, despite Cam Jones once again lighting up the Johnny's defense with 15 on 6 of 12 from the floor, 3 of 7 from deep. Zuby Ejiofor, 10 points and 4 offensive boards, and Kadari Richmond stuffing the stat sheet with 9.6 rebounds and 3 assists, kept the Johnnies in the game. Now, the game stayed tight for the first 4 minutes of the second half, but from the 15:45 mark onward, St. John's outscored Marquette 31-18, leading by as much as 19. Golden Eagles got as close as 10, 66-56 at the 6:20 mark, but then the Johnnies closed the game on a 13-7 stretch and one going away, 79-63. They just imposed their will on the game in the second half, keyed by their trademark relentless defense. Jones had just 9 points in the second half, shot 4 for 10, 0 for 5 from the floor, 1 of 2 from the stripe. Marquette shot just 39% from the floor for the game, not even 21% from 3 for the game. St. John's forced 17 turnovers, 10 steals, converted into 14 points. They got out in transition, scoring 14 on the break, dominated inside with 44 points in the paint. 4 of SJU's 5 starters scored in double figures. Ejiofor finished with 33, 23 in this second half to go with 9 boards. And Richmond put up 12 points, 10 boards, and 6 dimes and 3 steals. St. John's now 11-0 at MSG, and they'll play for the Big East tournament title for the first time since 2000. At the end of the day, look, no matter where St. John's is seated, they're a team that's built on some of the traditional hallmarks for a deep March Madness run. Dominant turnover forcing defense, number one. They're now number 1 in efficiency per KenPom at 87.7. They have a roster loaded with positional length and physicality. Davon Smith at 6 feet is the only player on a team loaded with 6'7" into 6'9" wings and fours that's under 6'4". They dominate the offensive boards. They're second in the nation at 14.7 a game. Granted, SJU leaves a lot of meat on the bone from beyond the arc and at the line. Sub 300 in the nation in three-point percentage, 339th, and sub 200 in free throws. Their 68.9% is 283. And that has them sub 200 in effective field goal percentage, 49.6, 267th. They live off their incredible ability to rebound their own misses, 37.9% offensive rebound rate. That's 9th in the nation, a big reason why they get an average of 8 extra scoring chances per game, and their ability to knock down mid-range shots. 5th most two-point shots taken, made, and 4th in percentage of offense via two-pointers in all of D1. They get out in transition, 13.3 fast break points per game, and they're tops in the Big East and 33rd in the nation with that, which compensates for their struggles from 3 and free. So yes, St. John's has done everything they can to this point to warrant going up a seed line, but even if winning the Big East tournament doesn't change things, whichever one of the currently projected number 2 seeds ends up with SJU as the 3 seed in there after the bracket, they should be very concerned because they'll be taking on the beast of the Big East, led by the conference's coach of the year, Rick Pitino.
Texas Tech is probably going to be the likely pairing of the one that's going to drop, or because I think everyone else is pretty much safe. It's a very, very strong 1 and 2 line, and where St. John's is, the numbers do not match up with the 2 seed, but they've been playing like a 2 seed. And I've actually noticed, by the way, first of all, those 33 points by Ejiofor, a Big East school record in the Big East tournament for any St. John's player. And I've noticed, again, the one amazing stat of all of this, St. John's total amount of points in their defeats that they've lost by is 9. There's no other team in America that can claim that the amount of points that they've lost by in all their games this year is less than double digits. It's insane. And they are insane this year. They have been unflappable. We'll see what happens in the tournament, though, because you can't play every game at MSG. Sorry. That doesn't happen. It is what it is. All right, guys, welcome to the Metamucil portion of the show as we move from 72-year-old Rick Pitino to 70-year-old Tom Izzo. But just like he was doing in his 40s, he's still terrorizing the Big Ten. He's still terrorizing the month of March, and he's led Michigan State to a regular season title. They'll be playing Wisconsin tomorrow in the Big Ten semifinals after they beat Oregon today. A very convincing second half. Anthony, have they done enough to do as much as they can to officially lock in a 2 seed? I think the 1 is out of the question for him after the SEC kind of has been going on point so far going into the semis, it looks like.
Yeah, I think the spot in his resume is going to have them pretty much locked as a 2 regardless of what happens the rest of the Big Ten tournament. They had an outside shot of getting the number 1, but so much will have to happen involving the other teams, and that will include winning the Big Ten tournament for that to happen. But let's look at the resume right now. 25-5 regular season, 16-3 in the conference, 11-4 against quad one opponents, 5-1 quad two, so combined 15-5 record in quads one and two, 9-0 undefeated in quads three and four. Considering this is a team that started the season unranked, but the net they went from 11-10. Surprisingly, though, they don't have a victory this season against a top 10 opponent,
Nope.
which is very strange when you consider how good the Spartans has been. But then you look at the rest of the resume as well. Um, the excuse me. You look at some of the teams that they're chasing, and in the one line, the projected one seeds. Duke 11-3, Auburn 21-3, as far as quads 1 and 2, respectively. Houston 17-4, and Florida 16-4. There's so much that would have to happen in front of them just to even open up the possibility of a one seed.
Mhm.
But as far as the two, they're pretty much locked in. And obviously today, you mentioned, Rabbi, they had a pretty solid win against Oregon today. 27 points over 15 Oregon turnovers held the Ducks to just 21% behind New York, 4 for 19 overall. Their defense is obviously just to set the tone today. And obviously they played against Wisconsin. For the Spartans, this is a chance to really pretty much give them an outside argument for one, but they're pretty much locked into two. I don't think a loss tomorrow in the Big Ten championship game is going to hurt them so
No.
much. I think they've done enough as far as the regular season resume to overcome an early loss in the Big Ten tournament. That they're pretty much going to be a two. Right now, we got the Atlantic um, tournament bracket. They would be a two seed in the South, which would send them to Cleveland. And if you're Tom Izzo, you take that in a heartbeat, considering the first 2 weekends would be in Cleveland. If you move on, you can take full advantage of it. They would play Robert Morris if that's the season to hold up at the 2-15. But right now, repeat the question, have they done enough to move up? Well, not really, because I don't think they're gonna move
No.
up unless something outrageously happened the rest of the weekend involving the SEC and obviously Rabbi, you'll talk about how ridiculous the SEC's been this season later on in the show. I don't want to take too much from your angle on that. But yes, I mean when you're pretty much dominating your conference, and even if you win your conference, you're not going to really move up because of what's going on somewhere else. That should tell you pretty much in itself just how deep the SEC conference been, but also with Michigan State, regardless of what they do, they're playing with house money right now. I mean, they win is great, but being a two seed is pretty much what they're going to be stuck at on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, look, you guys, we've been saying it for years. You know, you don't bet against Tom Izzo in March. This is Ken Palm's number 8 team in terms of, overall efficiency. They have one loss outside the net top 50. I mean, it's very much a two-seed resume, but I kind of got to agree with you guys. I don't think there's
Yeah.
anything that teams ahead of them on the one line can do that would open up a slot for Michigan State to move up. And honestly, if being where you are puts you in a geographically advantageous region where your fan base can travel, you say, okay, thanks.
Yeah, and
Thank
also,
you. Yeah, go ahead, go
yeah, I'm
ahead.
sorry. And also, I mean, we just watched obviously. Sorry, Jay, but Duke won earlier, so that helps off the Blue Devils never guard. Auburn has been pretty good all regular season. And I can't see Houston fall out of a projected one seed
No.
unless, like I said, something outrageous catastrophic happens in that conference. And Florida is going to have maybe want to be the fourth one seed. So, I mean, Michigan being at a two wouldn't be the worst thing in the world when going to Ohio for the opening weekend that allows your fan base to travel
Mhm.
a little closer to home. So it may just work out altogether, as you say, Jay. In March, you don't want to bet against Tom Izzo whatsoever.
Nope.
No, and I think it's what's going to matter is the fact that they're going to play in Cleveland opening weekend. Seeds like that will get the advantage in the first round. Right now, the one projected for them is Auburn. And we see that not a lot of teams can get past Auburn, especially with the way Michigan State, they need to play better offensively, but we'll get to that when the time comes. But Michigan State has been the best of a very loaded Big Ten conference that's going to possibly get at least 8 teams into the bracket. All right. I didn't pick anybody who was younger. I have 70-year-old Rick Barnes coming up next now with Tennessee. The answer to this question is the obvious. I don't know because they're incomplete right now. This has been a race really for that fourth number one seed. I mentioned before in the open, I'll say it again. Duke is locked in, regardless of what happens with Cooper Flag. He probably won't play tomorrow, but he'll probably play at some point during the tournament. And if that's the case, they're going to be the one seed. It's just a question if they'll be the overall number one. Auburn's resume has been the best almost the entire season. So regardless of what they're doing, now that they're in the semifinals, they'll be a number one. Houston is incredible when it comes to what they've done pretty much since the year 2025 started. And in what is the number 3 conference in America, they're going to be a number one. So it really comes down to which SEC team do you like? Is it Florida? Is it Alabama? Or is it Tennessee? That's likely going to be the final number one. And we'll probably know the answer to that tomorrow because, well, we may not even know the answer to that till Sunday because whoever gets to the final, whoever goes the farthest out of those 3 teams is going to be that final number one seeded. Here's the case for Tennessee. Now, Tennessee, by the way, we'll talk about what they have to do tomorrow to get there. But let's just get to Tennessee's numbers. A net of 5, a KenPom of 5, a BPI of 6, is a 26-6 record. They've only lost once at home this season, 6-5 away. Quad 1, 10-6. The worst of those losses you would have to say is a loss at Vanderbilt, but all of the teams that they lost to are in conference, and notably, all of those teams are going to be on there in Selection Sunday, and they're probably going to be 8 seeds or higher, most likely, although Vandy may not be. But 10-6 quad 1, 5-0 quad 2, 5-0 quad 3, 6-0 quad 4. I think you get the drift. The wins are pretty damn good, even when you look at it. They've beaten Louisville. They've beaten Illinois. They've beaten Texas. They've beaten Arkansas. They, ironically enough, so here are the games that matter in terms of this. They split with Florida in the oddest of ways, losing by 30 at Florida and winning by 20, shorthanded, by the way, against Florida at home. They did lose twice to Kentucky, but Kentucky's not in the conversation for a 1.
Nope.
They beat Auburn by 3. That was the only time they played them this year. That was a buzzer beater win because, just that's the SEC for you.
Yep.
And that's what you got with Tennessee. Now, Tennessee has been just outstanding this entire year. They are one of the nation's best at defense. They're 7th in the nation in scoring defense. They only allow 62 points a game, and they only allow teams to shoot a whopping 37.7% against them from the field. There is no one better in the country statistically at that. Now, I didn't mention what they did against Auburn because I wanted to just talk about that quickly. They're playing them tomorrow. They played each other around mid-February, and they played a game where the Volunteers, they're not one of the greatest offenses in the country because they're ranked like mid-100s. In the game against Auburn, which they lost 53-51, the Vols made a whopping 31.5% of their shots. And unfortunately for Tennessee, Auburn had John Broome. Tennessee did not have John Broome. That's the big difference. But you got just a great team around it. You got Jamal Mahashek. You got Zakai Ziegler, who had a big game today. You have one of the more physical teams out there. Charles Lanier, by the way, scored 17 of Tennessee's 21 points in the game against Texas today. It's that Auburn game that is going to make the big difference. Don't expect a lot of scoring.
Nope.
Expect a very, very, very tough game. And I think that's going to be the difference most likely to them getting a number 1 seed. They might have to go through that most be. I think going also against Alabama and Florida will be tough too. Again, might have to beat them too, but I think Tennessee can show the most that they can tonight or tomorrow night if they can beat Auburn tomorrow afternoon. But that's what I'm just saying. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be a very, very intriguing semifinals of the SEC tournament.
You know, what's interesting to me, Rabbi, about the Vols is, I mean, they have all of their losses are inside the top 50 in the net. Um, the only one that's even outside of the top 30 is that Vanderbilt loss. All the rest of them are inside the net top 25. What I do find interesting is that, you know, this is, you talked about their defense. They are Ken Palm's number 3 ranked team in terms of defensive rating, at 88.7. Their offensive rating, what? I mean, it's respectable. It's 18th, but it's an interesting split between offense and defense. And you look at
They're probably the worst offensive team out of those 4 competitive teams right now in the SEC.
They are, because Florida's number 3 ranked offensive team in terms of efficiency. Alabama is 4th. So yeah, I think you got three SEC teams battling for, you know, that final number 1 spot. It's going to come down to one of them. I don't think Houston can do anything to lose their spot on the 1 line. So it's the SEC's been the most dominant conference in all of college basketball year. So, you know, of course, why wouldn't it come down to 3 of their teams fighting it out for the remaining number 1 slot to give the conference two of their own on the 1 line?
Had to scrap the rant that I'm going to talk about this week, but just note the SEC is going to get at least 3/4 of their conference into March Madness, and that's a low end. It's probably going to be more like 13, maybe even 14 teams, which is insane for one conference.
Remember which conference's record they're going to break with that?
It's probably the ACC from some year.
Big East, 2011.
Was that a 9-team? Was that a 9-team league?
A 9
or 10 bid league, and that was the year UConn won the title. So when Cardiac Kemba was alive and well, all right.
I believe it was that year. That was them.
It was.
So
it was. All right. Act 3. Everybody dance now, no matter where you're seated. All right. Whether you are an SEC middle of the pack team with enough of a resume to get in, but you want to stand out, or if you're a disappointing preseason number 1, or you're a disappointing 2-time defending national champion, 3 teams are looking to do just enough over these next few days to raise their stock just a tiny little bit, giving them a moral and physical boost. Let's start with the physical boost and moral boost and of the Georgia Bulldogs. They've been a team who, despite finishing 11th in the SEC, they're probably going to be putting their dancing shoes on, just like, you know, as I said before, 13/16 of the league is going to. Are they going to move up from the 9-10 range with their performance this week? They lost Wednesday to Oklahoma in the first round of the SEC tournament. Anthony, does that ding them a little bit, you think?
Yeah, it does. And I do think they will probably safe. They would love to be an 8-9 seed right now. The Atlantic has some of the 8-9, has in an 8-9 matchup in the East, which would actually set up a potential second-round matchup with Duke. But, yeah, let's look at their resume for the Bulldogs. They finished the regular season in 2011. But then you scroll down, okay, the Ken Palm 35, PPI 38, net 33. But here's the thing about the Bulldogs. They're 4-11 against quad 1 opponents. They only have 1 loss between quads 2 and 4. So that just tells you that they've taken care of their business elsewhere. As well, this competition steps up where they had their struggles, obviously. But the Bulldogs, they had an opportunity to at least impress the committee and maybe even move up a seed or 2. Because, I mean, we all know 8-9 matchups are kind of toss-ups in the NCAA tournament. But also, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you may be even lower seed, or maybe in one of those 4 playing spots going to Dayton, Ohio, looking to just basically play your way into the field. They had a golden opportunity Wednesday night against Oklahoma. Close game. They kind of fell apart in the second half. They gave up a 16-0 run in the middle of that second half. And the tournament chances, according to ESPN analysts, dropped from 77% to 61%. Do I think they're still in the tournament? Absolutely, they're still in the tournament. They're still gonna be in the field, and that is kind of the beneficiary of being in the SEC conference and the fact that the conference has had perhaps one of its best seasons ever, and it's gonna have multiple teams in the tournament field. Um, what they could have done though, I think with a win or two, at least win one game, maybe move up to maybe a more manageable first round matchup where they might be a heavy favorite. Um, but right now, I do see Georgia kind of being anywhere between that 9 to maybe 11 seed. And this is the thing too, and we saw this last year with Butler. You know, when you have the opportunity to make an impression, you got to take care of your business. And the Georgia and the Bulldogs, they didn't get it done in a game they really needed to really solidify, really shore up their spot in the tournament. They're going to be sweating bullets on Sunday, trying to figure out what seed they're going to have. But ultimately, I do think they will be in the tournament. It's just going to be a matter of where they play and which seed.
Yeah, absolutely, Anthony. I mean, if you look at their record, I mean, obviously the 4-11 in Q1 is not exactly, sterling. But I mean, if you their losses, they have only one, let's see, they have one, two, three, four losses, out 5 losses outside the top 20. So I mean, they're and they probably have one of the better non-conference wins, beating St. John's on a neutral court back in November. But it's they're one of those middle of the pack teams that is probably going to get in because of the conference that they're in, not necessarily because of their overall resume.
Yeah, and it's a team that was riding high. They finished the season on a 4 game winning streak, including beating Texas on the road.
Mhm.
But they wet the bed when it mattered the most, and that's gonna definitely hurt their seeding to an extent because, as
Yep.
you said, Jay, this is a team that's going to get in because of the conference they're in, not necessarily because of their own body of work.
Yeah, I mean, you go eight. I mean, going 8-10 in the SEC any other year might have had them closer to the cut line. But when you go 8-10 against the conference that is the number one conference in the nation and is going to send seemingly almost every member of their conference to the tournament, that boosts a resume that is otherwise, in the middle of the pack. It definitely, I think, gives them a leg up. I agree with you. I think they're going to get in. But I do think it's going to be hard for them to get above the 8-9 game solely because they didn't make enough noise in the SEC tournament.
The wins are very impressive, as you mentioned, the St. John's, which was technically a neutral court, but I believe it was the UBS Arena, so that is as close to not a neutral court as possible.
Warren Nolan considers it. Warren Nolan, Ken
No,
Pavlik,
it's considered neutral.
They all
It's
consider
considered
it a
neutral.
neutral court.
It's
So
considered neutral. I don't care, Warren Nolan. This is just an opinion of an actual person looking in there. But the wins also considering you have a win over Kentucky, the win over Florida. All of those wins are going to be teams that are going to find themselves on at least the 4 line and above on Selection Sunday. So we'll see what happens with that. All right. Jay, you've been spouting numbers a lot, so it's time for you to spout numbers about Kansas. Kansas's disappointing 23-24 season has creeped over into the next academic year. Can they salvage themselves in the tournament? Did they do enough to get themselves off the 6-7 line I'm seeing that they're being predicted on after they got eliminated last night in the Big 12 tournament quarterfinals to Arizona?
Yeah, I mean, they were coming into the Big 12 tournament. The Athletic had them projected as the 6th seed in the South region. 20-11 overall record, 11-9 in the Big 12. So being 2 games above 500 in the third best conference in the nation is no small feat. They were 9-2 out of conference, 14-3 at home, 4-8 on the road, though 2-0 neutral. Came in with a net of 18, KPI 24, strength of record 25, BPI 12, strength of schedule, net 10 out of conference 21. Bill Self always schedules out of conference well. They were 5-10 in Q1, 2-2 out of conference, 6-1 in Q2, 6-0 in Q3, 3-0 in Q4. Best wins, they beat Duke. They beat Michigan State, both of them on neutral courts. They beat Arizona and Iowa State at home. All four of those are quad one wins. Best losses, they lost to Houston. They got swept by Houston. They lost to Iowa State on the road, and they lost to Texas Tech at home. Those are all teams that are going to be four-liner better, and they're all quad one. Bad losses, Kansas State on the road is technically their worst loss, though it is a Q1 loss. Coming in, KenPom had them ranked 21st in overall adjusted efficiency, 23.88, 52nd in offensive efficiency at 116, number 8 in defensive efficiency at 92.2. They beat UCF 98-94 in overtime in their first Big 12 tournament game, and that game, as somebody who follows them all season, was a microcosm of the entire season for the Jayhawks. There was the good. Hunter Dickinson, 23 points, 13 rebound, double-double. Zeke Mayo, 24 points, including 5 of 7 from 3. KJ Adams, 15 points, 7 boards, 5 dimes, including 6 of KU's 17 offensive rebounds, plus 3 steals and 3 blocks, doing his usual stat sheet stuffing. And AJ Storr finally showing us the player he was at Wisconsin last season with 19 off the bench before fouling out. But you also had the bad. They once again blew a double-digit lead late in a game against a team they should have blown out. Now, they beat them by 51 in early January, granted by only 4 by the end of January. Rylan Griffin can't find the basket, 0 of 5 from the floor, 0 of 3 from 3. DeJuan Harris, only 6 points on 2 of 8, 0 for 3 from downtown. He did have 7 assists, but he had 4 turnovers before fouling out. Adams turned it over, trying to do too much in an attempt to win the game on the last possession of regulation. And then you had the ugly. They allowed Keyshawn Hall and Darius Johnson to light them up for a combined 47 points. They allowed UCF to hit 14 of 33 from beyond the arc. And they looked clueless at various points on offense that ultimately wound up in them committing 16 turnovers. UCF picked them off 11 times. And based on this game, I came out of that game thinking they didn't even deserve to be a 6 seed, which would be the first time ever since Bill Self has been the head coach of Kansas. And it would be just the 3rd time during the Jayhawks' current run of 34 straight NCAA tournaments that they were that low of a seed. They needed a much better performance against Arizona in the quarters, but once again, the inconsistency that has been their consistent companion all season was very evident, and they fell short, losing 88-77. Kansas played from behind for most of the game, trailing by 12 at 2 different points. Each time they fought their way back, but they had their last lead at the 8:44 mark of the second half. Arizona held the lead for the final 7:48, and Kansas just could not string together good possessions on either side of the ball with any consistency from that point on. It was the epitome of 2 steps forward, 2 steps back for the Jayhawks. Look, their top 10 ranked defense allowed Arizona to shoot above 180 for the game. 53.4 from the floor, 44.4 from 3, 85.7 from the line. They gave up 46 points in the paint. They got almost nothing from their bench. Rylan Griffin was basically a 0 once again. KJ Adams had less of an impact. And despite Hunter Dickinson with another double-double, 19 points and 12 boards, Zeke Mayo topping 20 points again, including 5 threes, and DeJuan Harris having an offensive explosion, 16 points with 4 threes. They had good-looking point totals, but none of them could make a shot over that final 7:48 while the game was still mostly a 1 or 2 possession affair. Kansas managed just 5 points over the final 3:24 after Harris's 3 got them within 4. For the second night in a row, Kansas put up a performance that may have done more to move them backwards than forwards in terms of projected NCAA seeding. Bill Self's 23rd Jayhawks team has been notable in all the wrong ways. They struggled to find consistent offense. The 3 transfers that Self hoped would provide shooting and offense around Dickinson, Mayo, Griffin, and Storr, have struggled as a group, with only Mayo, the hometown kid from Lawrence, showing anything remotely close to what was expected of him. The preseason number 1 team fell out of the top 25 at the beginning of March. That's only the second time that's happened in the last 16 seasons. And along the way, Kansas suffered the worst loss of the Bill Self era and the worst loss ever handed to a preseason number one team back on February 18th when BYU flat out trucked them 91-57. Look, the Jayhawks aren't bad. Despite not being the typical iteration of one of the bluest of blue blood programs, they're a lock to make the NCAA tournament. But they've been incredibly run of the mill, which is well nigh unacceptable in Lawrence, where they've been among the elite of college basketball more consistently than just about any school in the country over the last 4 decades. Bottom line, and to answer the question Rabbi posed, no, emphatically no, the Kansas Jayhawks have not done anywhere close to enough to improve their seeding come Selection Sunday. In fact, I'd go so far as to say the committee should slot them closer to an 8-9 seed than the 6 seed they're currently projected to be.
Do you actually see some of the 8-9 seeds? I think a 6 seed is perfectly fine for Kansas with the way they play. Yeah, they playing bad, but I do think, again, you just mentioned 2 of the reasons early in there. The Duke win and the Michigan State win.
Oh, look.
Who did you it's never sometimes when did you beat them? It's who did you beat? When you look back at it, that's exactly what it's going to say. Yes, they've been terrible lately, but I do think that now, will I pick them to win a game in the tournament? Probably not.
Here's
right now they look just bad.
And here's a change in guidelines for the committee that is actually going to help them. Last 10, which used to be a staple in terms of one of the metrics that the committee looked at to determine are you in or out, seeding high or low, that metric has been tossed out. It's no longer allowable as a criteria. So that may actually help Kansas because down the stretch, not so much. The overall body of, that's why I said the overall body of work has them as a lock. But I tell you right now, the way they've been playing, I don't think they deserve to be as high as a 6 seed.
I understand completely. But again, it really just depends on just the overall body of work. But again, I didn't think they deserved to be a 4 seed last year. They were a 4 seed last year, and they didn't get far, although they did win the first round game. So, you'll see. All right. Now it's time for the pay the piper because it's time for UConn, who have been just as disappointing, if not worse. They haven't. I mean, to be fair, the injuries have hurt them, and that's why I do think that even though they're probably going to lose this game down 8 right now to Creighton in the second half, I do think they've earned enough to at least go to a 7 seed, but that's their ceiling. They're probably going to be in the range of a 7 and 8, nothing higher than that, especially if this game goes out the way it does. Season started really good. In fact, I had bragged until about pretty much in 2024 that they were undefeated in the lower 48 states because they had 3 losses in a row to Hawaii. Little did I know that was the beginning of the end. Quad 1, 5-5, and the wins they're fine. The biggest win, I think, is the fact that they've actually swept Marquette this year, although St. John's also swept Marquette this year. They've also beaten Creighton, although they're about to get back that loss now. But unlike our last two contestants, they do have quad 2 losses. They have 3 of them, 2 of them in that preseason tournament in Maui to Colorado and Dayton. They're not seeing, at least Colorado's not seeing the field. Dayton might win their tournament. And they also lost at home to Creighton. And I believe this would also probably qualify. No, this will probably be a quad 1 loss. So this will be a neutral site loss. And I think
this will be a quad 1.
The biggest loss of them all, the one that's probably could prevent them from being a 17, is the loss to 210th ranked Seton Hall, a quad 3 loss. They did get that back last week, but that ended up being so inconsequential. It was a quad 4 win, not even a quad 3 win. So UConn has just struggled a lot this year. However, one of the reasons that they have struggled a lot is the fact that Liam McNeely just hasn't been healthy. He was gone for a month. And yet, despite that, he won Big East Freshman of the Year, being the second consecutive UConn freshman to do so. Dalton Castle did it last year. When they did that, by the way, they got a production from their guard, Aiden Mahady, was just 5.3 points per game. Not good, not good at all. Nothing apparently good happens when you play DePaul, which is when he got the injury on New Year's Day.
Yep.
But in February 11th, McNeely, 38 points in that win against Creighton. That is actually there was only, he had 10 rebounds, by the way. He's had four double doubles recorded this season, and 5 3-pointers. You want to know the only freshman to do 35 and 10 with 5 triples in a row game?
Yes, please.
Steph Curry and Kevin Durant. Those names are pretty damn good. He's had some stat sheet stuffer games the entire season, 17.7 assists, 5 rebound a game against Butler. And he's just had so many of these good games. He also had, by the way, he also had 26, 8, and 4 against Gonzaga, a game I personally saw at Madison Square Garden in December. UConn is really relying on McNeely a lot, and the Big East did have a down year. They're going to send a minimum of 4 teams, a maximum of 5 teams to the tournament this year, which is unlike the SEC's 74 teams that they're sending to the tournament this year themselves. But I think UConn is just biased and sure, and I think they've done enough, and especially when they have a healthy McNeely, which they do right now, to get themselves at least into a position where they do not have to face a Duke on opening weekend, where they do not have, which they would right now, in Joe Lunardi's projections, they would be an 8 seed playing a 9 seed Baylor in Raleigh against Duke, possibly in the second round. Good luck with that, especially if Cooper Flagg comes back in that game, which is most likely. UConn has done the best that they possibly could this year under the situations that they have. It's hard to three-peat, apparently much easier to two-peat, as we saw last year, but considering their offensive rating is out off the charts, 122.1, that's 14th in the nation, but the defensive rating is bad. It's 102.1. And note this, their defense still has not improved. Creighton has not done a good job shooting the ball in the second half, which is why their lead has gone down. But in the first half of tonight's game against UConn, they shot a whopping 75% from the field. If you want to do math very quickly, that's 3 out of every 4 shots made. I know Creighton is a big team, but that's ridiculous. So overall, I think UConn has done enough, in my opinion, with their resume to get themselves up to a 7. Do I think it's going to happen? If you had to put a gun to my head, I would say enjoy that 8-9 game. And just like Jay, split your brackets, please, when you put them into whatever place you go to, because Jay Kaplan always splits his brackets when it comes to an 8-9 game.
Hey, the 8-9 game, as we all know, has really become a 50-50 proposition. It becomes a question of whether
absolutely.
Who actually, whether one team is a worse matchup for the other. The thing that interests me about Connecticut, when you look at their net team sheet, is that their top 2 loss. I mean, getting swept by St. John's is not a bad loss. I mean, St. John's, those losses are not going to hurt them at all. They have 2 other losses inside the net top 50. That win over Gonzaga on a neutral court has aged really well, considering that Gonzaga's already made the tournament. The loss to Villanova on the road, yeah, it's a Q1 loss, but Villanova,
it's still a Q1 loss. I think it's
Q1 loss.
Fine.
Yeah, the thing is that and Rabbi, I agree with you. I mean, as brutal, the Seton Hall loss, on the road is brutal. But they also lost to two other teams that are outside the net top 60. The neutral court lost to Dayton, and the neutral court lost to Colorado, and neither one of those has aged well.
Both of them were in Hawaii, by the way, as well.
Yeah,
so all 3 of those losses came in a row. But yeah, no, absolutely. It's essentially what we said before. That is by far the definition of an average team right now, and we'll see what happens on Selection Sunday if they get a little bit of a bump, but most likely it's an 8-9 game for them, and it's very easily. So we'll see what happens.
They in order to have a chance to improve their seeding, they needed to make the Big East Conference Finals, and they needed to convincingly beat Creighton, and they needed to have a good showing against St. John's. Kind of almost like last year where St. John's had the good showing against UConn. Not that it did them very much
It
good.
made it matter. So I think we've seen. I think we can start taking away the narrative of having a good showing against this team. Does sometimes it's just about win, 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 and that's
You
kind of
got
how we're
to
going to go. Yep,
look,
and
it's
yep.
that simple. At this time of year, you have to keep stacking wins because that means you get to keep playing. And the deeper you get into your conference tournament, the better you look to the committee in terms of the eye test. And that, while it's not a definitive metric, they won't actually come out and admit it. The eye test is something they all use when they're deciding between two teams with similar resumes.
All right, time for Act 4, hanging by a thread. Not literally, that would just be cruel. We're not going to do that.
Living
There
on
are
a
some
prayer? Go Bon Jovi.
no, but yeah, we're just no hanging, no threading. We're just going to talk about these teams.
Okay.
Okay. There are some big boys, some big programs in our bubble watch segment,
Yeah.
and one team that tried their best, but we can't put them as a big boy. As I think 20 years ago, a lot of people outside of Boise didn't even know that Boise State had a solid college basketball team. All right. Jay, let's stay in our lane and talk about and unlike staying in their lane, let's talk about the North Carolina Tar Heels. As this selection Sunday, it's going to be an uncomfortable hour come 6 p.m. after they lost to Duke
Yeah.
tonight. So did the Tar Heels do enough to need not worry?
I am definitely going to be white knuckling it on Selection Sunday, as this may very well be the last time I wear Carolina gear in March. Look, their bubble status coming into the ACC tournament this week, the Athletic had them as last four in. 20-12 record overall, 13-7 in the ACC, 7-5 out of conference overall, 12-3 at the Dean Dome, 6-6 on the road, 2-3 in neutral courts. Their net was 40, KPI 55, strength of record 43, BPI 28. Those are solid metrics. Strength of schedule, their overall net was 43. Their non-conference strength of schedule was 5. And that is something that the committee is going to take into account, because it's a question of which one how much they weigh that against the 1-11, now 1-12 Q1 record, 1-5 non-conference. The interesting thing is that outside of Q1 coming into the ACC tournament, North Carolina was 20-1. 7-0 in Q2, 6-1 in Q3, 6-0 in Q4. Best wins. UCLA on a neutral court. That was quad 1 and it's held up. SMU at home, quad 2. Best losses. They lost to Michigan State. They lost to Florida, both on neutral. They lost to Kansas on the road. Those are all Q1 losses. Here's the thing that is also going to be a thorn in their side, though, and we'll see how much it actually ends up hurting them. They have a really bad loss on their record, and that's losing to Stanford at home, which is a Q3 loss, a game they were up by double digits and basically just gave it away. KenPom, they were number 37 in efficiency coming in at 18.34, 20th in offensive efficiency at 119.7, 71st in defensive efficiency, 101.3. And guys, it's rare that it's not something I have had to say too much in all my years as a Tar Heel fan, but is there any team that is more the epitome of a bubble team than this year's Tar Heels? Coming into the ACC tournament, Athletic had them as one of the last four in. ESPN, CBS, SI, TSN all had them first four out. That 1-11 Q1 mark, 1-7 against the top 25 is the black eye that folks point to as to why the Heels shouldn't hear their name called on Selection Sunday. No team with a Q1 record like that, and now it's 1-12, has ever made the NCAA tournament. Overall, 9 of UNC's 12 losses, and 10 of their 13, have come against top 50 opponents, including 4 teams in the top 5. Arch rival Duke twice, now 3 times. And the 3 teams atop the SEC standings, Auburn, Florida, and Alabama, who also happen to be the teams ranked number 3, 4, and 5 in the AP poll. The other 3 losses came against teams ranked number 62, number 68, and number 82 in the net top 100. The sore thumb, as I said, being that home loss to number 82 Stanford. The other potential issue for UNC is how many teams the ACC, the 5th-ranked conference in the net rankings, will actually wind up sending to the NCAAs. Will it just be the 3 teams in the top 25 in the net? Duke, number 1, Clemson, number 22, and Louisville, number 25? Or will UNC, whose net is now up to 36, keep them on the right side of the cut line despite their now 12 losses against a very tough schedule? Remember, 5th toughest schedule in all of college basketball. They've kept themselves in the conversation by continuing to stack wins early in the ACC tournament, beating Notre Dame 76-56 in their second round game, giving them 8 wins in their last 9 games and improving their Q3 record to 7-1, beating fellow bubble team Wake Forest 68-59 in the quarters, keeping their Q2 record unblemished at 8-0. The other bubble teams losing their first games in conference tournaments also helps UNC, but being on Duke's side, coming into this, knowing they were on Duke's side of the bracket, meant that the semifinal matchup with the hated Dukies tonight was their only chance to improve that Q1 record short of making the ACC tournament final. The team we saw in the win over the Irish was the one we saw during their late season 6-game winning streak before they crashed and burned in the second half of the regular season finale against Duke. That team was explosive on offense, averaging almost 91 points a game, topping 94 times, locked in on defense, allowing just 73 points per game, holding opponents to under 75 4 times, shot the lights out from 3, 47.8%, led by Jalen Withers, who shot 13 of 22, that's 59%, and did the work in the paint. Over 11 offensive rebounds per game, averaging 41 points per game in the paint. In essence, they were the type of team we expect to see wearing Carolina blue, largely due to a change in the starting 5 and their overall 8-man rotation. That team had 2 bigs in the starting lineup with Van Allen, Lubin, and Withers, with Jalen Washington rotating in, which allowed Drake Powell to slide back over to his natural position of small forward. He had spent most of the season playing out of position as a small ball power forward, and had R.J. Davis spend more time with the ball in his hands as the point guard, with Elliot Cadeau being only the nominal starter at the point, but with Ian Jackson and Seth Trimble playing more minutes off the bench in place of Cadeau to have 5 legitimate shooters or scorers on the floor. That rotation used that way actually hung with Duke in the regular season finale. Yes, I know. Cooper Flagg was spent most of it on the bench with foul trouble, until Hubert Davis inexplicably spent most of the second half playing that small ball lineup that got them blown up by Duke in the first meeting back in February. That UNC team, which beat the Irish, shot 48.3% from the floor, 13 of 28 from 3, over 46%. Withers went 7 of 10 in his home, coming back to his hometown of Charlotte. They had 19 assists on their 28 field goals. Cadeau had 10. Won the battle of the boards, 42-34. Lubin and Withers combining for 19. That team is a tournament team, and I'm not the only one who thought so, as evidenced by ESPN and the Sporting News joining The Athletic in moving them up to last 4 in. After that win, though, SI and CBS still had them among the first 4 out. Then Thursday's games played out, and fellow bubble teams Texas and Boise State had better resume-improving wins later in the day than UNC's win over Wake. Then everyone, it seemed, had the Tar Heels back among the first 4 out when the bubble watch pages were updated prior to today's games. The game against Wake was a rock fight with both words in all caps. Unlike the win over Notre Dame, which is the epitome of a team game with plenty of contributions across the board, the win over Wake was an R.J. Davis special. Last year's ACC Player of the Year carried the Heels with a team leading 23 points on 5 of 9 from the floor and 5 of 6 from 3, 8 of 8 from the line. Outside of Davis, the team shot just 29.8% from the floor, 18.8 from 3, and 73.7 from the line. No other Heel had more than 10. Their defense did hold Wake to 33.9% from the floor, 9.1 from 3, 2 of 22. And other than Hunter Salas going for 25, a big reason why Wake won the points in the paint battle, 30-18, no other Demon Deacon did any damage. But as I said at the top, this was always going to come down to the 3rd edition of the Tobacco Road 8 Mile rivalry in the semifinals. And I doubt anyone saw it playing out the way it did. That first half was reminiscent of the beatdown that Duke inflicted on North Carolina back in February. The Blue Devils closed the half on a 15-0 run, holding the Tar Heels scoreless for the final 5 minutes of the half, taking a 45-24 lead into the break. UNC was out-rebounded 23-14. They shot 1 for 10 from 3. They committed 7 turnovers, leading to 10 Duke points, and they allowed the Blue Devils to shoot 50% from the floor, take 15 free throws, they made 11, and win the points from the paint 20-16. UNC mounted a valiant and borderline miraculous comeback in the second half, flipping the script and thoroughly outplaying the Blue Devils, outscoring them 47-29, and having a chance to tie the game at the line with 4.1 seconds left. But a line violation of all things wiped out a Van Allen Lubin free throw, and Duke survived 74-71, dropping UNC's record to the aforementioned 1-12. Lubin carried the team with a 20-point, 10-rebound double-double. The much-maligned Elliot Cadeau actually had 15 points, including 3 of 3 from beyond the arc. The only Tar Heel to hit a 3, as the rest of the team went 0 for 14. Drake Powell and Seth Trimble combined for 24 points, 8 boards, and 4 steals, but the Tar Heels needed more from R.J. Davis than the 4 for 10 from the floor, 0 for 3 from 3, and 0 for 1 from the line shooting performance he turned in. So, regarding the question, has UNC done enough to get off the bubble? Had they beaten Duke to get to the ACC tournament final, thus giving them a second Q1 win with a chance for a third against either Clemson or Louisville? I think yes. It would have had them on pretty decent footing as one of the last 4 teams in, especially with the other bubble teams like Indiana and Xavier being knocked out yesterday. I also think that Texas getting bounced today and Boise State, if they don't make their conference tournament final, also might have tilted things in UNC's favor. Both versions of UNC showed up in tonight's game. The version we saw in the first half has zero business having their name called on Selection Sunday. The version that showed up in the second half was the one that came into this game having won 8 of their last 9 and looked very much like a tournament team and not just of the last 4 in variety. All of this is me taking the long way around to say I have no fracking idea if they've done enough. This loss has me, and I'm guessing some other well-known bracketologists, and we'll see when their pages are updated in the morning, probably are inclined to join me in leaning towards no. But when former Indiana and Georgia coach and current ESPN analyst Tom Crane was asked on SportsCenter right before tip-off if he thought the Heels get in even with the loss to Duke, he leaned towards yes, saying, quote, the tie goes to the blue blood. And ESPN's latest forecast model still has the Heels at a 60% possibility to make the NCAAs. And if the ACC gets 4 bids, they're the most likely to be the 4th team. We'll find out Sunday which way the committee wound up leaning, because as of right now, I got no freaking clue.
Before the tournament, Joe Lunardi said the following: "They're North Carolina. We can't turn our eyes away. It's like a car accident. Their season, in some ways, has been a car accident." And when you say that 1-11 in quad 1, sure is. All right. I wanted to hold off on this because literally in real time this is happening.
Yes.
But Anthony, I am going to go to you. They are up 4, by the way, with 13 seconds to go. So let's talk about Boise State. They have been living in Bubbleville. They most likely up 4 with 12 seconds to play and could be playing for their championship tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern for the Mountain West Conference. So, Anthony, even if they lose that game, if they lose this game, which is still a possibility, it's college basketball, has Boise State done enough to get themselves a tournament bid on Sunday?
Yeah, for those of you who are watching on YouTube or even watching this live on Facebook, the reason why I'm kind of looking away is because I have the game on to my left. So yes, this is the team I'm literally talking about, but they're playing in real time as we speak. But Boise State, they win this. They're going to win this game. It'd be huge, and for a number of reasons. One, because they came into the tournament basically as one of those bubble teams. Either depending on what bracket you look at, the Athletic has them as one of the last 4 teams in. Joe Lodori has them one of the last 4 teams out. So it depends.
And it's going to probably flip, by the way, if they finish this off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have to make their free throws. That's the number one important thing.
Yes, they do.
But yes, they finished the regular season 22-9, 14-6 in the conference, 2-5 only in quad 1s, but the two wins came against Clemson, who was ranked 10th, and against St. Mary's, who right now would be a 7 seed team if the tournament started today, according to the Athletic. 4-2 against Quad 4 opponents, UNLV, Nevada. On the road against New Mexico, who they're playing right now, has key victories. 5-1 against Quad 3 and 10-2 against Quad 4 opponents. They did stumble though going into the Mountain West tournament, losing 83-73 at home to Colorado State. So that loss did kind of knock them onto the bubble. But they did finish the season outside of that. But they started the tournament with a big win against San Diego State, who was also one of those last 4 teams in, according to Joe Ladardi. Just give me 1 second, real time. Okay, you missed it. So yes, Boise State is pretty much in. Okay, so yes, Boise State holds on. This is huge because they'll be playing for the conference tournament, and now this gives them another quality win over New Mexico, who was the 1 seed.
Yeah, this is a quad 1 win because it's on a neutral court.
A neutral court, and they beat San Diego State to get to this point. So this is a big victory and a big boost for Boise State. When you look at the rest of let me give you a second to bring up the rest of the resume. KenPom 44, BPI 48, and then net is now 43 currently, but 12-2 at home, and neutral site 4-2. But now they'll be 6-2 if you count the 2 games in the tournament. So yes, this is a big victory for Boise State. If you ask me, have they done enough to get off the bubble and to kind of sneak into one of those last 4 spots? Absolutely. This is the game I thought that they had to have really to kind of make their case for the selection committee. I do see them now as maybe one of those teams that will be playing in Dayton. At this point, I think the Broncos would take it without question.
Oh yeah,
they absolutely would take it. And this is a big blow to New Mexico. I mean, if you want to look on the flip side of it, because they won the 1 seed in the tournament, and now you got to wonder,
they'll probably be in. They were
they're pretty much in,
but they're probably going to be in.
Yeah, they're going to be in, but how it affect their seed and what seed they're going to finish is kind of up in the air after this. But yeah, Boise State, they were able to finish it off in this game. And by the way, and I have to give me just a second because I'm watching this and still looking up what was going on. Give me just one moment. Big shout out to Andrew Meadows because he scored pretty much up until those free throws, Boise State's last 7 points, and including a big 3 that kind of gave him the lead with under a minute to go. And I don't know if you saw it on the inbound, the breakaway dunk. That should have been an and one, by the way.
It should have been an and one. I just saw that immediately. It should definitely been an and one.
But yeah, absolutely. This is a big win for the Boise State Broncos. Regardless of what happens tomorrow in the championship game, now if they win, they automatically in. I mean, that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah.
Remember a year ago there were an at-large team that got in. There won't be the case this year, but it definitely does give the argument, give this side a more compelling argument to be one of those last 4 teams that get in and get off the bubble for that part.
Yeah, what's very interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, New Mexico was going to be in anyway. It's just a question of whether or not this loss hurts their seeding. Lenardi, I think, had them projected. Yeah, so it's a question of whether or not this actually hurts their seeding. I don't think it'll hurt it too much, but this is huge. I mean, guys, has it been 2025 so far has been a freaking hell of a year for Boise State.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
And this is the thing. When you think of Boise State, you think of Bluefield and football. You don't really think of basketball, which is hilarious because the 2 teams I talked about in Boise State are known for the football programs, more so the basketball programs. And we may just see both of those programs have their teams in the field of 68 to start the tournament.
Yep. One thing that's going to be very interesting is the fact that in the second game of the Mountain West semifinals, which hasn't aired yet, which will be starting, Colorado State plays Utah State. Utah State is a general lock in most people's eyes in the tournament. Colorado State is not.
No.
And if Colorado State plays Boise State tomorrow, might not be a 5-bid league, and that somebody would be left out. Could it be a San Diego State? We'll see what happens. It's gonna be very interesting to see. Not as deep as a conference as the Mountain West was a year ago, but they've definitely made their case. All right. Finally, Indiana is up next, and I didn't have to worry about doing any of this looking around tonight because they lost nice and early for us. Their coach might be stepping down this year, but have the Indiana Hoosiers stepped up enough to get to the big dance? And the answer is an unequivocal, I don't think so. Jay, thank you for answering, but this is my portion of the segment. But yes, they have not. When I look at the quad one standings of 4-13, again, quad two, 4-0, yay. Quad three, 7-0, good enough for government work. Thanks for your win over UNC Greensboro. Quad four, 4-0. It's just the quad one wins don't impress me a lot. There's the away win at Penn State, away at Ohio State, away at Michigan State, which is a rare win for anybody this year, especially in the Big 12. Purdue, a good home win, but just the losses just pile up. I mean, the best team out of those net-wise that they lost to was Gonzaga, who was at that point the third-ranked team in the country, but they lost that game on a neutral court by 16. They've lost twice to Oregon, once in the tourney, which we'll talk about in a second, once away. You just look at all of these losses, and they're just not enough, I think, to really go into this tournament or to go into the tournament. And again, most of their losses are close, but one of their losses, like they lost to Illinois at home by 25. They lost to Iowa away, which is a quad one, even though it's away, and they also lost that by 25 as well. The Indiana Hoosiers can only be described as bubbling. Now, they are a near consensus team in the first four rated, first four out in over 100 projections. A look at the bracket matrix shows the Hoosiers in that state of 102 of 107 projections, 77 of 81. Now, they were 500 in conference play after closing out the season with 5 losses in the last 7. They won at Michigan State, as I mentioned before, versus Purdue. Swept Ohio State, which is going to be key because of the resume comparisons. They lost at Nebraska, lost at Northwestern, lost at Iowa. They were a 4-6 on the road team. Going into today, KenPom 47, net 54. And it's funny. In the game against Oregon, which they lost to yesterday, 36% from the field. They started both half strong, just never got momentum. Led 17-9 to start the game. Oregon went on a 28-12 run. Every time Indiana had a run, they didn't really do much with it after that. It was just Indiana just never sustained anything that they had this entire season and just continued again. Woodson's time in Indiana, by the way, Mike Woodson announced his retirement midway through the year. The former Knicks coach, as everyone might know, led the team to the NCAA tournament in his first 2 seasons, losing in both the first and second rounds. 2023 missed the tournament altogether, finished tied for 6th in the Big Ten. Woodson has been having second thoughts about leaving Indiana, but if Woodson wants to come back, too bad. The administration has already been looking for his replacement.
Nope.
Solid run in the NCAA tournament might be the only thing that would allow that. Now, comparing them to the rest of the field that we talked about, I actually did a little bit of looking into that. And I'll go through quickly pros and cons. For Boise State, superior net ranking. Boise State 7-7 in quad 1 and 2 games. Hoosiers do have double the amount of quad 1 wins. Indiana is better in KPI in strength of record and wins against bubble teams. Colorado State, slightly better net ranking again for Colorado State, but the Indiana Hoosiers have the quad 1 wins. And then North Carolina, a significant better net ranking for North Carolina. As Jay mentioned before, it's 35. A quad 1 and 2 record of 9-11, which is better than 8-13. But as you know, that 1-12 for North Carolina does help in the camp of the Hoosiers. So, with that being said, Indiana might sweat Selection Sunday, but I think overall, if Indiana does make it in, I think people will be more annoyed than not. My verdict is Indiana is out when it comes to Selection Sunday, and I think that's the right choice.
100%.
Hey, if Wilson want to come back to the Knicks, we'll open a door for him. I mean, we can always use an assistant coach that can teach defense to this team.
We could always just use somebody who can play 10 minutes off of the bench, actually, ironically enough. If he can do that, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, but Tips don't play his bench.
That's true. Tim still wouldn't play him. All right. Time for our final act. And our final act is, oops, we didn't reach our daily NFL quota. We need to make our limit and scene. The first week-ish of free agency moves, as we've mentioned before, have meant as much, if not more, than it meant locally. So whether it was a big name changing spots or a big Buffalo QB almost getting the same salary as his Hollywood fiance, let's show our favorite moves from the last few days in the NFL, starting with Jay in a piece that is tailor-made for him. DK Metcalf gives the Pittsburgh Steelers the most diva-ish wide receiver locker room I think I've seen in decades. Just give me the damn ball at the wide receiver 1 and 2 spot. How does DK Metcalf and this new 5-year, $50 million contract fit with the Pittsburgh Steelers?
I will take exception to you saying that this is the most diva-ish room, because I would definitely say that any wide receiver room that has Antonio Brown automatically moves to the top of that list. And the one that had both Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool prior to the trade is probably up there as well. You'd think that with both the QB1 and QB2 from last season being free agents, and team president Art Rooney beginning the offseason stating that his preference was to re-sign either Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, saying, quote, "That'll be the priority. I think that will give us the best opportunity to move forward." You'd think the Steelers would get their signal caller situation sorted so they would know what type of wide receiver to go after, so that they'd get one that would best fit with the guy throwing him the ball. GM Omar Khan said as much at the Combine, that the plan was to have the quarterback in place first and then look for receivers who fit the passer. But as I've often said to friends and you gents as well, we're the Steelers. We never do anything the easy way, which is why the Steelers' first move of the free agency period was to go out and trade a 2025 second-round pick to the Seattle Seahawks for two-time Pro Bowl wide receiver DK Metcalf, and then promptly signed him to that 5-year, $150 million extension, making him the highest-paid player on the roster with a $30 million annual salary, and automatically makes him wide receiver 1. Though the addition of Metcalf could make the Steelers' offense more appealing to a quarterback looking to find a new home or induce a former teammate to re-up. Hi, Russell Wilson. Overall, I like the move. At 27, Metcalf is still in his prime. He's a marquee skill position player for this offense, and at 6'4", 235 pounds, he's one of the NFL's most physically imposing wideouts with good hands, competitive drive, and a proven ability to take the top off any defense as a deep threat. In 15 games last season, he had 66 catches for 992 yards, 15 flat average, but only 5 touchdowns, career low. He had averaged 8 scores per year previously, topping 10 twice. He's averaged 77 receptions per year over his 6-year career, topping 80 twice. He has had at least 900 yards receiving each season, topping 1,003 of them. It'll be interesting to see who ultimately ends up throwing Metcalf the ball. The Steelers brought back old friend Mason Rudolph on a 2-year, $8 million deal, but he's more likely to be the backup unless Wilson, who was Metcalf's quarterback for his first 3 seasons in Seattle and has publicly stated he'd like to return to the Burgh, signs elsewhere. The Browns and the Giants are also vying for his services, and the Steelers lose out on the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes, which as a fan, I fervently hope that they do, as I don't want that circus anywhere near the 4-1-2.
And as a Giants fan, I firmly with them actually signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers, so we can keep that circus away from Miss Rutherford.
Yins hear me. Anyone else but Rodgers, anyone The other thing to keep in mind, keep an eye on once the team convenes for OTAs is how George Pickens handles dropping a slot in the hierarchy of a Steelers wide receiver room that now has a lot less question marks. Head coach Mike Tomlin publicly said the talented but temperamental young wide receiver who is entering the final year of his rookie contract needs to grow up. The Steelers have shown zero hesitation in showing the door to wide receivers whose petulance outweighs their production. And with Metcalf aboard, any leverage Pickens may have thought he had is now gone. The Steelers now have the flexibility to let Pickens play out his rookie deal or even trade him a la Chase Claypool. But if Pickens comes into OTAs with the attitude that Metcalf's arrival can only make him better by potentially giving him more one-on-one matchups with less safety help rotating his way, then Pittsburgh will have a pair of wide receivers that will give opposing defensive backs nightmares, regardless of who takes the snaps. But again, anyone other than Rodgers, please.
Again, co-sign completely differently, but me and Anthony would go otherwise. We'll talk about that when that bridge comes to it or when we get over that bridge. Anyway,
Blow
Anthony.
up that bridge when we get there.
Oh, someone's going to be blowing up that bridge. Hopefully it's Minnesota. All right, Anthony, Josh Allen is staying in Buffalo with an extension. And by God, thank God I get to say this because Deshaun Watson was the last person that actually had this. Has the most guaranteed money in NFL history to stay in Buffalo long term.
Yeah, he record set a 6-year, $330 million extension. It keeps him in Buffalo through the 2030 campaign. He had 4 years left on his previous deal, and yes, $55 million postseason, and yes, $230 million of it guaranteed. Only Patrick Mahomes has this deal, even with the facility of what Josh Allen is getting with his $450 million contract. But this is the Bills pretty much rewarding Josh Allen for his first MVP campaign. A campaign that saw him throw for 3,700 yards, 28 touchdowns, 12 more touchdowns on the ground, led the Bills to their 5th consecutive division title and a second AFC championship appearance in the last few seasons. It was funny too because I was on YouTube and I found Josh Allen's first playoff appearance was back in 2018 against Jacksonville, that wildcard game, and you watch that game.
That wasn't against Jacksonville. It was against Houston.
It was
wildcard
Houston,
game.
so.
It was wildcard game. They did make the playoffs, so that was with Tyrod Taylor and QB.
Yeah, but if you watch that first playoff game and look at Josh Allen now, obviously the growth and his development as a quarterback definitely shines out. And keep this in mind, he did this. He won his first MVP after they traded Stephon Diggs, who was his go-to guy for pretty much the last few years, and we know about that relationship. But yeah, this is a big deal. The Bills able to get this contract done. They lock in Josh Allen for the long haul, and also they keep the future Mrs. Josh Allen in town as well. Yes, it is my obligated Kate Bishop reference for this show.
It might be your obligation. I don't agree with it, but whatever.
Well, I mean, look at the bright side.
I don't agree with that.
Yeah. What does he have against Kate Bishop?
I have nothing against Kate Bishop, and that's not the obligation portion of it.
Okay, we were not having a Kate Bishop, or Gwen Stacy slander. Okay, Haley Steinfeld is a queen on this show. And by the way, if you ask her who the teams in the AFC East, she's pretty much going to tell you the Buffalo Bills and their 3 little brothers. That's literally what she said in the interview. But yeah, this is a big deal for the Bills because they got their quarterback, their franchise quarterback, pretty much locked in for the next decade.
I tell you though, I got a lot of respect for Allen not gouging the
he left $5 million.
Yeah, he basically said, "Look, Buffalo is home. It's where I want to be. I just want to be here. I enjoy playing here. Just get it done." And again, it's kind of refreshing to see an athlete remind his agent who works for who.
Yeah. And
I
on top of that,
mean,
too, you got
once
Josh
less
Allen.
money.
You got Josh Allen. You got Haley Steinfeld. You got Bills Mafia. And by the way, you're getting a new stadium as well. So, Buffalo Bills franchise have a lot to look forward in the next few years.
Indeed.
And they just got Joey Bosa on free agency.
That too.
So
Yeah,
that's
you lose Von Miller and you replace
move.
him with Joey Bosa.
And you're only getting it for 1 year, 12 million, which is a pretty damn good deal too. All right. Hey guys, who wants to play a game of mediocre QB dominoes? Because that's what we're gonna be doing right now. So last Friday, we got the news that Geno Smith was picked up by the Raiders for a third round draft pick, the 92nd overall, coming up in the 2025 draft. This all started back basically to the fact that Matthew Stafford was looking for an extension with the Los Angeles Rams, and the Raiders and Giants were both heavy suitors for it. In fact, it was almost to the point where people thought that the Raiders had the framework in for a possible deal. And it was also learned that the Giants also had that same framework pretty much locked up too later on. However, Stafford decided to stay to about a $40 million a year contract or an extension in Los Angeles for about 2 or 3 more years. So plan B, because when you have an owner like part owner like Tom Brady and a 70-year-old coach like Pete Carroll, you kind of want to win now. So the deal was to get a two-time Pro Bowler in Geno Smith and also the AP Comeback Player of the Year. I wrote back. I never wrote back to them. Smith has appeared in 94 career games, which is ironic considering I never thought he would be anywhere near that in the beginning of his career. 83 starts, 64.8% completion percentage for 19,143 yards, 105 touchdowns, 72 interceptions, a 88 passer rating. And he also has 12 touchdowns on the ground. Now, what he's done in the last 3 seasons with the Seahawks, where Carroll coached him in 2022 and 23, third best completion percentage in the NFL, almost 69%. 13 games with 300 plus yards passing. That's the fifth most in the league over that span. 249.5 passing yards per game. That's eighth most. 71 passing touchdowns. That's tied for eighth. Recorded 19 games with a 100 plus passer rating over that span. Career highs in 2022 in attempts, completions, yards, and completion percentage. Fifth in the NFL that year with a 100.9 passing rating. Now, in a league where you're going to have a three-time Super Bowl champion in Patrick Mahomes in one quarter, a rookie who is kind of moving up the charts for Denver, Bo Nix, in another quarter, and a quarterback who's led his team in Los Angeles to the playoffs twice in the last 3 years in another quarter, like Justin Herbert, with a coach like Jim Harbaugh, you're going to want to at least have someone who gets a chance for you. Now, since 2024 campaign, 4,320 yards, 21 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, is a good year for almost any other quarterback out there, especially with the stuff that the Raiders have been putting out there at quarterback over the last few years. They've tried Aiden O'Connell. They've tried now new Kansas City Chiefs backup Gardner Minshew. That's right. If you thought this is the one thing that the Kansas City Chiefs needed to get to the Super Bowl was again and win is Gardner Minshew, you're absolutely correct.
Wait,
but overall,
Sean's going to become a Chiefs fan next year.
He probably will become a Chiefs fan next year. But Seattle just Gino wanted basically. They basically wanted a long term. So basically, the reason why Gino couldn't get everything done is their GM John Schneider. They wanted to extend Geno Smith, and it became very apparent quickly when he wanted $40 million a year, pretty much exactly what Matthew Stafford just got in his extension. Seattle shopped. Las Vegas listened. The deal was done pretty quickly. Speaking of, now Seattle needed a replacement for all of that. Enter Darnold, Sam. Yep. You saw what he did in Minnesota last year. It was pretty damn good. 3-year, $100.5 million deal to do that. And you saw the numbers last year. 4,319 passing yards, 35 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, a 102.5 passer rating, and a record of 14-3. And Darnold, when he was with the 49ers, which we've talked about has been an elixir apparently for him in big ways. Clint Kubiak was his passing game coordinator. It's now the offensive coordinator over in Seattle. And remember, Kubiak saw Darnold throw for 246 yards and 3 touchdowns last year in Seattle as a Viking. Now, a lot of people, and this was mentioned, and by the way, also, he got sacked a ton, especially in the playoffs, where he got sacked 11 times in the 2 games that they lost. By the way, only 2 teams had more sacks than what Seattle and first-year coach Mike Macdonald did last year with that team. That's 54 sacks altogether in 2024. But yeah, that's what really kind of hurt Sam Darnold a little bit, but he got that big contract. Again, in those 2 losses, the loss where they lost home field advantage by losing to the Lions 31-9, and then losing 27-9 against the Rams in the first round of the playoffs. Darnold had 53.1% of his throws completed, 411 yards, 1 touchdown, turned the ball over twice, a fumble for a touchdown. Again, sacked a combined 11 times. Now, Sam Darnold's going to have an interesting kind of team that he is going to be throwing to. Exit DK Metcalf, obviously. He's over to Pittsburgh. Bring in, as of today, an old friend in Cooper Kupp.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
With Seattle for 3 years, $45 million. Kupp played his college ball in Eastern Washington. He's now coming back to Seattle, where he's going to be a 1B, probably to what Jackson Smith-Njigba has done in that 1A slot. One of the reasons why DK Metcalf kind of wanted to and needed to go to Pittsburgh, because DK kind of only works really as a number 1 option in a lot of cases. So with Smith-Njigba and Cooper Kupp, which is high possession receiver who goes for a lot of yards, high possession receiver who goes for a lot of yards, hopefully that, plus the running back combo of Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, can get Sam Darnold to the same success that he did with Minnesota last year. And who knows, maybe Geno Smith can actually have that same success this year in Las Vegas too.
Quarterback carousel. Try not to, it's definitely, somebody ascribed it as the carousel, and not as a carousel, but as a ongoing game of musical chairs, and you don't want to be the last one without a seat when the music stops. It's going to be interesting to see which team that actually becomes the one left without a chair.
And then the loser of that is going to get Aaron Rodgers. Okay. For Jay Kaplan and Anthony Stewart.
You know what? I don't want Aaron Rodgers. Give me Kenny Rogers. Anybody, but just keep Aaron Rodgers far away from the Giants locker room.
For Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, they're succinct and to the point. I am the Adrian Brody of words, Stephen Rabinowitz. Yes, I'll wrap it up. Stop rushing me. I will wrap it up. Just give me a minute. You want us on demand, go to youtube.com/onthesportslines. How about hearing us live? Go to facebook.com/onthesportslines. And Jay, Twitter, just like time, is a construct. Go for it.
Yeah, our handle there is at ONTH Sportslines, where you'll find a link to each new show, like tonight's, along with other tidbits and nuggets from the world of sports that we think are worth your time to check out. This week, I've posted a link to a story by Jason Stark of The Athletic, in which he asks a very important question. Have the Dodgers replaced the Yankees as baseball's evil empire? Several folk from each team, along with others around MLB, weigh in. It is a fun, well-written piece that's very much worth the read. Enjoy.
And please enjoy my column going against it. How the fuck did we get to Carlos Rodon and Clay Holmes as the starters for the New York baseball teams on opening day? I will have it posted to Jay's Twitter link in a very, very quick time. We'll see you next time as the Madness of March is continuing. Go crazy. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.